Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Seize Your Business podcast. I'm Bryan McDonald from OnPurpose Growth, and my co-host here, Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law.
Hello.
And today we have Matt Scales, a local entrepreneur working in commercial real estate, as well as he's got his own startup business that he'll talk about with two of his partners. And today we're talking about the journey startups go through and the challenges that they have and experience Matt has had in startup. So welcome, Matt, and why don't you give a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Good to be here. Enjoy watching some of the previous podcasts that you guys have done. I think they're enjoyable, inspirational. It's good information for folks out there in the business world. So, and maybe those wanting to get in. So, kudos.
Well, thank you, man. Appreciate
Absolutely. Yeah, glad to be here. Looking forward to just chatting through some of the experiences that I've gone through. Hopefully, that helps to shed some light for other folks out there, maybe as a resource or some tips that maybe I wish I would have known at those stages of the game to push forward with. So awesome. Good to be here. Looking forward to chatting through the topics today. So let you guys lead the way and jump in.
So let's start with, pretty simple. What are some of the top things that you see startups struggling with? Because I'm sure there's a list of 100 different things that startup owners have to worry about. What are some of the common problems you see and some of the solutions?
Sure. No, I think those are great questions. Just from, and I guess the best thing I can speak to is what I've gone through. Constantly reading articles every day, probably too much. I catch myself getting sidetracked very easily, which would probably be one of the problems. Staying focused, staying consistent. I think that those are important. But I always go back to a great article that I read a few years ago, just about really what makes a product good, and it generally starts with the team and the right people, and surrounding yourself with people that maybe do something better that you don't do well at. Mm-hmm. I think those are important things to keep in mind, and people that you trust and that you can build a trustful long-term relationship with. Because at the end of the day, as you guys well know, it's a grind. And when you're battling it out at 11 o'clock at night, trying to get an idea and a concept completed and on paper or on a digital platform, it takes good friendship and someone that you can feel good about working with to get there. I think that's important.
Getting the right people was probably the biggest difference maker for our business, like going from losing me money to being stable. When I first started, and even a couple years into it, I was trying to put together these great systems that would allow me to micromanage everybody, which was turned out to be a mistake. I still really love thinking in systems, but like you said, you have to have key people that you trust. And when my focus shifted from making plug and play jobs that anybody could do to just getting the right people, trusting them to run their areas, and basically less micromanagement, things really started to turn around in a positive way. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
And that's key, and that's another element just based on seeing what's worked, what hasn't, and again, reading through as many resources as I possibly can, talking to folks that have been there and done that or have made it successful. Is exactly that. Don't micromanage anyone. If you put someone in a box, they're not going to be able to be productive in a way that makes them special or unique, and gives it that element of surprise, maybe, if you will, that otherwise you were trying to control. And I'm guilty of that too, because I just feel like if you want it done the way you want it done, then you just do it yourself. But sometimes that's not always the right way, and that's why you have a team member or a partner or a friend that is able to give that other point of view that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have.
So I know you have the blog that highlights businesses and startups and whatnot, and you put a lot of work into that. Is there some type of theme in regards to the challenges that those businesses are going through, or some quality that helps them get through challenges so they can thrive and survive in the marketplace?
Sure. I enjoy doing those. It's fun. First off, I enjoy writing. Whether or not it's good is, in the eye of the beholder. But it's fun for me to reach out, find these local entrepreneurs in the Chicagoland area and beyond. But this is relatively new for me to start working on that. So I've only written a handful, but it's been fun finding these individuals out there that have overcome a challenge or more and continue to overcome them to get to where they are. I just interviewed and wrote about a gal in Westmont who started her very first veterinary clinic called Urban Veterinary Associates, and tremendous story. She was ready to start her business. She had the location set up. She had worked as a vet director at various clinics around the Chicagoland area, was ready to take that strategic leap of faith forward and go at it on her own. And about a couple of months before she was supposed to break ground on a new location, she decided to get some last minute volunteer work in. And so she went to Tanzania to work with a charity group called Mission Rabies. And what they do is they vaccinate pets, if you will, somewhat domesticated pets in the Tanzanian area. And so she's out there. She's there for a 2-week stint. Halfway through her visit, there with her other crew members, she goes back to the hotel and suffers a headache, a significant headache. And the last thing she remembers is losing vision. And 4 hours later, she woke up in a hospital. She had suffered a brain aneurysm. So this is literally just a few short weeks from when she's supposed to open up a brand new business. She's got the lease. She's got everything ready to go. She's paid architects to do the interior design. She's got GCs on call, ready to go to work. She spends a month in. First off, they airlifted her from Tanzania to Nairobi because they weren't equipped to take care of the bleeding in her brain. So she ends up spending a month, an entire month, in Nairobi in a hospital. Wow. In a hospital bed. She had lost the use of the left side of her body and fought through it. And these are stories that are so incredible. So she finally makes it back to the United States after a month later, and with the idea squarely on her mind that she still needs to open and start a business.
Yeah, right.
She goes through rehab, and what she does during rehab is she uses these surgical tools that she would have to use in her veterinary clinic practice, and she practices suturing things together to get the dexterity back in her hands, and certainly in her left side. To be able to do it. It's an incredible story.
Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, and those are fun things. To me, now, is that a challenge that everyone's going to face? Probably not. Not like, how to pick the best partners. That's a more common one. But the reason I enjoy writing about those things is hopefully that it helps someone else see that it can be done no matter what the level of challenge is.
What's the name of your blog?
So it's on my website, montyrealestateservice.com. I hang my license with App Properties Commercial, great organization to be involved with commercial brokerage with. I have my own website just to work the search engine value and set that aside. But it's on there, and you can check it out. It's right on the home. Her story is actually on the homepage right now, and I've written some other ones as well that I think personally are equally inspirational and maybe a little different.
We'll make sure
approach.
to link to that in the show notes if you're listening. So,
what it sounds like from what you were saying, Kevin, and what you're saying, Matt, is that in times that startups face challenges, it doesn't matter what the challenge, it matters how resourceful you are when you face that challenge. I mean,
that's a really good point, because I was thinking the same thing when you're telling that story. Yeah, no one has that exact problem.
Sure.
But, there's no... It really is hard to come up with a cookie-cutter set of problems that startups are going to face. That's the nature of being a startup. You're going to wake up and face a new crisis, at least once a week.
That's fun, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
This is fun. Banging my head against the wall.
I guess to kind of go to that point, what do you guys think are some of the key tools, problem-solving tools that you need to have as the owner of a startup in order to survive whatever the problem is that you're having?
Well, from my experience and also listening to others go through it, I think it's some self-confidence. I think that's always one of the biggest challenges that anyone faces. I know I've faced it, and I still face it sometimes, where you feel, one day you feel great about what you're doing. This is going to work. The next day you're like, shit, what am I doing? Is this did I make the right decision here? And actually had interviewed another gal, Melissa Villanueva, who started Brew Point Coffee in Elmhurst. Very cool story as well. But what she had mentioned that she does, and she's a very young entrepreneur in her early 20s, mid 20s, she says she meditates every morning and she focuses on believing in herself. She puts the belief power towards her team members as well. And I do it. So after chatting with her a few months ago, I've incorporated that into my routine, and it helps every morning. Just some things like that to believe in yourself, I think, is a key thing, and do it not with blinders on. I always like the comment someone had made a while back when we first started the golf forward business, which was, did you run this idea past anyone but your mom? Luckily, we did, and that was one of the only negative feedback that we had received on it at the time, and everything since then has been positive. But it's good to step outside the comfort zone and ask some folks that aren't your mom or your wife or husband or whatever it may be, and get some hard feedback.
Meditation is something that I did for a while too, and it really helped. I only stopped doing it because I found other ways to ratchet down the stress. But when you're a business owner, sometimes you just get wrapped up in the stress of holding the world on your shoulders. And when you're under a lot of stress, you're not making sharp decisions. So
Sure.
if you can get your exercise in, your meditation, eat healthy, and just keep your body and mind right, and have that confidence to know that when your body and mind right, you make good decisions, that's a huge
Absolutely.
boost.
Yeah, I agree. And working out is definitely a key thing. I try to go at least 5 days a week and take care of the body and the mind. I agree 100%.
When I first started, on my couch, I found that I can bill hours as an attorney, and I keep all of it. Man, I'm working every weekend. I'm just gonna be it's a new business. I'm not sure it's gonna work, so there's not gonna be a moment that I take the foot off the pedal. And that was before I had kids, so I could do that. But I quickly found out that it was counterproductive, or there were diminishing returns to just continually powering through. And I found that I'm much better at what I do and much more productive if I set rules for myself as to when I'm working and when I'm off.
I think that's a key point. Absolutely. And if you just think you're just going to sit there and grind 15, 16 hours a day and do that 7 days a week or 6 days a week, whatever it may be, that's not productive. I agree with you 100%. And I sometimes still get caught up in that predicament with myself. And it's like, I got to step away and spend some time with my daughters, do something that is fulfilling, and not that the work isn't fulfilling, because it should be, or else do something different. But which I think is another key element, and I've experienced that firsthand. I started doing some work in a couple of gaming startups when Illinois passed the Video Gaming Act. We got involved. We were inside of an entrepreneurial shop, and some guys much smarter than I were in there as well, and I was able to learn from them and got involved in the gaming industry, not because I've always yearned to be in the gambling industry, but because it was a new startup, it was a new industry for Illinois, and I wanted the challenge. But I've since moved on, and it just wasn't a fulfilling thing for me. Not that there's anything wrong with anyone else that's in that business. Just for me, I wasn't feeling good about it anymore. So I moved on. So I think that you're right. It's got to be something that you feel good about, and that you don't just grind away and burn out after 3 or 4 months. Stepping away is important.
And you consider your mental downtime. I like to watch Ken Burns documentaries, especially like the one on baseball.
That is the greatest documentary ever. That baseball is phenomenal.
I've watched it a couple times, but it instantly relaxes me.
Yeah.
It's an effort to stay awake. I mean, it's interesting, but it's 3 hours on baseball in the 1920s. You just get to a zen, relaxed place.
Indeed.
But you consider that work time. I mean, that's part of what you're doing to get yourself mentally in a good place to continue going. It's like exercise, it's the mental detox, basically, that you have to go through in order to be sharp and make good decisions
Sure.
every day. But, I mean, that's a hard balance. That was one of the hardest first challenges I had to face, was just getting the mental balance right, the work-life balance, and finding a system. I talked about systems thing, finding a system that would work in my life to allow me to, sustainably run the business rather than just push super hard for, a year and burn out.
Well, and I'm curious, did you find that you had to sacrifice a lot, like time with friends or time with family, or not getting in for me, a round of golf that maybe you'd like to do when it's the last warm Friday of the season, which I did take advantage last Friday. But,
Yeah, right.
Did you sacrifice? Did you find yourself missing out on things to some degree?
Well, I feel like if you're not setting rules, you do. I think in the first year is different. When you're first starting, it's hard to have those rules, but eventually you've got to get an equilibrium. And now, even a couple years in, when I was doing things, when I was in the right headspace, I wasn't making a ton of sacrifices. I was working like everybody else was. I was just way more efficient at it than I would have been had I been working for someone else. It was the work smarter, not harder. But you shouldn't sacrifice being with your kids if you got kids.
Right.
That's you have to build that time in. So I guess my answer is when there was a crisis or something that had to be done for a client that weekend, I would occasionally work out all weekend and sacrifice. But once you get the equilibrium, that happens faster for some people than it does for others. But I don't feel like I bust my tail, working longer hours than people who just go to a day job.
I agree, and I don't buy into the notion, and my folks were hard workers, and I think that generation was full of hard workers, not to suggest that our generation now isn't, because I think that they are, but the notion that you need to grind 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and then by the time you're 60, you can retire and enjoy life, I think it's BS. I don't want to wait till I'm 60 to be able to climb a mountain or do something along those lines. I think it's, to your point, which is another key takeaway I would say, is time management and working smarter, not harder. And I think I mentioned before, I get guilty of it by spending, I'll read an email, an article, which leads me to another one, and all of a sudden I forgot about the task of writing that blog or getting, getting that contract completed. So that's key, and that's something that I try to work on every day. Is just,
what are some of your key time management tricks that you would tell people to follow if they're just getting into that?
I keep my calendar. I put an hour to do project A, an hour to do project B. In between those, I might set aside 15 minutes or 20 minutes to return phone calls. I don't answer the phone if I don't recognize the number. And I know we talked about this
absolutely.
Offline on another comment about just getting sidetracked and taking every phone call. For starters, I don't like not being prepared for whatever that caller may want to discuss. And then it takes me away and I become reactive instead of proactive. And I just don't think reaction is what pushes the ball forward. It's being proactive.
And even with the simple thing of not answering the phone every time it rings, especially if you're engaged in a conversation or a meeting, it trains you to focus. In my perspective, it trains you to focus, as well as it keeps you from being constantly reactive, and especially if you're dealing with you're working with clients and you're always answering the phone. It's that one time that you don't answer, they get upset at you because you've trained them that you are reactive, right? So it's my perspective is it's a balance thing. It's like stay on focus, and you can actually get more done. And if I don't know who the number is, I don't answer it, and leave a message, and I'll get back to you, right? I believe there's too much in this world that people just respond no matter what, and it's trained our world to think in a flawed way.
You become a slave to the grind versus controlling it, and I think that's key. Another thing that I like to do. I just read a great book called The Organized Mind. It's a little hard to get through. It's written by this PhD in neuroscience, but it's all about how to stay focused in a very information busy world that we live in. And he talks about techniques, and part of what he says is focusing on the task at hand. Don't try to multitask. Anyone that says they're multitasking is full of it, because you're not going to do well. If I spend 1 hour talking on the phone, typing an email at the same time, and trying to get a presentation out, I'm not giving any one of those three the best quality time that I can give it, and certainly not 100% of the goodness that should go towards it.
I like to start my day, and I'm sure you guys do the same thing. I think everyone that successfully time manages does this. But first thing I do before anything, maybe I'll check my calendar, see what I got going on for the day. but then I order my to-do list. I've got a Google Sheet that I keep that's a running to-do list, divided into A, B, and C, and D. D being delegate, A has to be done today, B is time sensitive, C is not time sensitive. I'm rarely in the C zone. I would love to be in the C zone more often. But, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 in the top category and then move on. And emails are usually, somewhere in B. They're, B2 or B3, but I don't automatically just have my email open and I'm, waiting to respond like you were saying.
Sure.
Returning phone calls, that's going to be its own category. It's going to be the stuff that, maybe is time sensitive, but not has to be done today. And then you focus on each line of that Excel sheet. It feels great to tick a couple lines off.
Yeah, tick them off.
And you don't worry about any extraneous stuff until you get to it. Add it to your to-do list if it comes in.
Right on.
Don't address it immediately unless that's the most urgent thing.
For sure. No, I think that's spot on. And in fact, in the same book that I was mentioning, he talked about when he was going to school. I think it's Dan Levithan or something like that, who wrote the book Organized Mind. Definitely recommend it. But he talked about a very similar thing you just described, where he was interning for a company, and the CEO, and he's an older fellow, so at the time they had stacks of mail, and he did the same thing. He categorized, this is important mail, this is stuff I can wait for, and it was these are stacks of mail and papers on his desk, which it's smart to hear you say that, because that's
so no matter what the time it is, no matter what tools we're using, the concept you're saying is a very powerful concept that lasts through time. Whether you've got digital things or paper things in front of you, it's a powerful message to hear.
Sure, you could take that all the way back to the hunter-gatherer days and say, I've got 4 hours of sunlight left, I better go hunt and get my fire built, or or I can sit here and watch the waves roll in. Time management, right?
and go to sleep hungry by watching the waves, right?
Exactly. Possibly die tomorrow.
Possibly, right?
Well, that's something. Matt, thank you so much for for joining us. We'll link to your blog. Give us the name of the blog one more time.
So MontyRealEstateService.com.
Okay, great.
And,
we'll link to that in the show notes, and we appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah,
today.
thank you guys. I
thanks.
appreciate it.
Thanks for being on, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great.